Legend. A word, my friends, that can often be overused in speedrunning, gaming, or really any aspect of popular culture. But a word in its truest meaning, which elicits thoughts of stories told by many people over countless generations, maybe around a campfire or images scribed into a cave wall. Stories which, for better or worse, may or may not be true, or become distorted over time, like an ancient game of broken telephone from years past. In speedrunning, proof, generally in the form of a readily available video, is paramount to having people believe your claim of a record speedrun. However, it wasn't always that way. Decades ago, when items like capture cards, DVD recorders, and PVRs weren't readily available, many speedrunners claimed records without video proof, and they were believed or not believed based on a body of evidence surrounding their character, any existing videos of their gameplay, or other people who had seen them play in person. So here are 5 speedrunners who claimed records without proof, whether or not they were believed, and for how long. All of these are Nintendo 64 speedrunners, since those are what I know most about, and if you know of any other legendary speedrun claims that had no video evidence, let me know in the comments, as I'd love to hear about it.
You can't make accusations like that without evidence. I assume that you have some?
Expert Gamer was one of 7 founding members of the Perfect Dark Elite in the year 2000, who had some really good proven records in his own right. He's credited with achieving 26 untied world records from the years 2000 to 2002, most of which have proof, like this 143 on Infiltration Special Agent, which is still a top 30 time today. But his most contentious record was a claim on the final bonus level of the game, War, on the hardest difficulty, Perfect Agent. Expert Gamers set a proven untied record of 56 seconds in July 2001. But a few months later, in March 2002, he made a cryptic post in the world record thread, "Meh, old times, never posted," which included a War Perfect Agent 54, a would-be 3-second untied world record over the rest of the competition. Meh is not exactly the reaction I'd have for a 3-second untied, and even more, none of these 3 records were ever proven. However, they were allowed to stand based on Expert's reputation as someone who had proven many other records, and as a well-liked administrator in the community. People knew Expert was capable of great speedruns, so they believed him and accepted his claims on the rankings. But they didn't know just how good War Perfect Agent 54 really was. It would be 2 more years until Carl Jobst, at the time far and away the best Perfect Dark player, would get a 54 on video. And to this day, 16 years later, only 2 other all-time greats, Brian Bosshart and Perfect Ace, as well as one War specialist, David K5, have completed 54 seconds on the level. 4 great players in 16 years. Suffice to say, many became skeptical Expert Gamer actually got such a time in 2002. Over the years, there were a number of threads made considering the removal of Expert's 54, but the old Elite administration's view was that it was a decided matter, and the time would stand. 54 wouldn't be beaten until Ace did so with 53 in 2007, and that wouldn't be matched until Boss in 2012. And no one would match or beat these until Carl with 52 in 2016. It was then Carl, now the Perfect Dark champion, played War Perfect Agent again, and realized just how remarkable Expert's 54-second claim in 2002 really was. Carl made a thread arguing a few points as to why the record should be removed from the rankings, namely that 54 seconds was a huge outlier compared to the rest of Expert's times, a huge outlier compared to other world records of the same era, a good reputation is not a good argument to upkeep a time, and it took Carl about 50 hours to get 54 back in 2004, so over the course of such a long and intentional grind, why would Expert not have been recording even though he had the ability to do so? Finally, the community had enough, and thanks to Carl's wise reason, the Elite Council, sort of like a sitting board or committee who decides on controversial matters in the community, voted to remove Expert's 54 from the rankings. Expert actually showed up a few weeks later and posted thankfully about the time being removed, claiming he'd been trying to remove it himself for a while, but wasn't able to do so. Anyways, what's done is done, and experts War Perfect Agent 54 will always go down as one of the most noteworthy record claims that had no proof. Berube was a similar case, but even more contentious, as his claim was that he tied Brian Bosshart's quintessential Damn Agent 53, a truly remarkable run in its own right. Berube was a fairly low-ranked player, though one who did get a couple of proven world records like Depot Agent 26 or Surface 1 Agent 104. That being said, Damn 53 was a much better record than these. Berube attempted to prove that he at least had the skill needed for Damn 53 by sending a tape to a proof moderator with some of his other records, as well as a pile of Damn Agent 54 runs on it, though the end screen on these runs did read Best Time 53. Having the 53 saved on the cartridge isn't proof of the record though, as you could use a Game Shark, turn on turbo mode or walk through walls, get a 53-second run saved on your cart, then go play normally and get a bunch of 54s that show Best Time 53. And Game Sharks were very accessible back in that day, as you could just go to a game store and buy a brand new one. Nowadays, you have to find them off eBay, most of them don't work, you often need to stack 2 or 3 of them in a row to get it to turn on. It's a huge pain. However, the GoldenEye moderators at the time accepted Berube's 53 on the rankings by virtue of him having shown he was capable of playing Damn Agent competently on his tapes, and the matter was considered settled forever. By 2006, only Ilu, Wouter Jansen, and Dan Chervone would tie the 53 before it would much later become a very common record. And over the years, various movements to remove Berube's 53 would pop up, but be quickly quashed by the elite administrators. Skip ahead to AGDQ 2015. I was sitting in this very room, in the basement of the Hilton Washington Dulles Airport Hotel, the site of the infamous Woody Gets Mad video, and just below the room where Oxwa's iconic Track and Field 2000 100-meter dash world record would take place. Jimbo and I spoke with the founder, creator, and webmaster of TheElite.net domain, Derek Clark, about the value of accurately keeping and maintaining history. Clark seemed to agree that in his opinion the time should be backrolled. I took that conversation to mean that, as the owner and webmaster of the rankings, Clark would finally be willing to remove it himself. But what he actually meant was that if the Elite Council were to vote on the issue, he would be willing to use his one vote in favor of removing Berube's time. This misunderstanding resulted in an absolute dumpster fire of a forum thread when we all returned from GDQ, which I will link in the description. I know how much some of you love reading these old kinds of flame wars. But to some, a number of old boys who were still on the Elite Council at the time, despite most of them not having played or even cared about GoldenEye and Perfect Dark speedrunning since roughly 2002, were vehemently against the removal of Berube's run. Berube himself surfaced for the first time in years to defend himself in the thread and reiterate his claim, but in the end, the 13 or so members of the Elite Council voted, and Berube's claim to Damn Agent 53 was erased from the Elite rankings, restoring what felt like to many order to Damn Agent, and retroactively crediting Ilu with being the first to tie Boss's Damn Agent 53, roughly 2 years and 2 months after it was originally achieved. There are still some who criticize the removal of Berube's 53 and Expert's 54 as inconsistent, given that there are many other significant records on the Elite rankings which have gone unproven. However, these are the two most noteworthy, egregious examples of such which stood on the rankings, in both cases for more than a decade. This much more recent case shows a good example of how attitudes have changed in speedrunning over the past 20 years, especially when it comes to recorded proof. Aki is a young Japanese Super Mario 64 speedrunner, not to be confused with Akiken, another Japanese speedrunner whose records were removed from the leaderboards for having spliced videos. Well, Aki had a 1527 and 16 star, second place to Zaya's 1524, which had stood for nearly 2 years at that point. On March 23, 2018, Aki had been practicing some 120 star category without recording, then just randomly felt like playing a 16 star run to freshen things up. I think you can see where this might be headed. Aki began recording around 9 minutes into a good 16-star run when he sensed he was on a possible world record pace, and we can see him play out the ending to get a 15:22, which would have been the world record at the time. Most Super Mario 64 runners agreed that Aki was definitely capable of the record, that he likely got it without any trickery, but also that the new record should not count on the rankings, and it didn't. So it just goes down in history instead as this little side note or asterisk when talking about the 16-star world record progression. What's interesting is that a half-recorded run is far more proof than in the previous two cases, and a speedrun under these circumstances almost certainly would have counted back in 2002, so this really shows how speedrunning mentality has changed over the years. There was no drama, no controversy, people generally knew that Aki got the time, but also knew that it just couldn't count. Even more unfortunate for Aki, another upstart runner, Ouija14, got a new world record of 15:17 only about 2 weeks after this, on April 5th, and just 9 days later, Aki would get another 15:22, this time fully recorded and verified, but Aki would never end up being credited with holding the 16-star world record. Some chimed in on our speedrun with clever catchphrases like, "No vid, no did. No record, no record. A tough lesson learned indeed."
Nice shot!
This one is a bizarre saga spanning nearly 20 years across many games. Australian gamer Andrew Kent, who also went by Vulpix, not to be confused with the fire-type Pokemon Vulpix, was a longtime updater of an ancient site, Nintendo 64 High Scores. A very rudimentary site straight out of the 90s, Kent and others submitted their scores here in games like Star Fox 64, Beetle Adventure Racing, Nagano Olympics, and 1080 Snowboarding. He even made some kind of janky overall ranking system, scoring N64 HS points based on your scores in each games, where of course Kent himself is ranked number 1. The site does have a proofs page, which lists all the players who have submitted videos or picture proof to the site, though all the links redirect to expired Yahoo pages now. But interestingly, Kent's name is not listed among the players who ever provided proof. Even I'm listed there with links to videos of some Mario Golf records I submitted in 2008, but there's no known video or photographic evidence of Andrew Kent ever having played a Nintendo 64 game. You'd think that if you were really proud of your gaming achievements, to the point of putting yourself as number 1 on a Nintendo-wide ranking system, you'd want to share these achievements with others. After all, have you ever heard of anyone who claimed a bunch of speedruns or high scores, but never proved them for a long time, who later turned out to be legitimate? Kent also allegedly played GoldenEye, where I came to learn of him. And if we take a look at his GoldenEye Times page, hosted on Angel Fire, we'll see his last update was in 2011. That makes sense, as that's around the time the Elite rankings became fully automated and players no longer had to host their own Times pages. His Times page lists a few achievements, including having held more than 3,000 points for over 9 years. That being just about the number you need to stay inside the top 50. So Kent had been in the top 50 at this point since about 2002, and he'd remained in the top 50. And anytime new players would come along, climb the ranks, and bop him down, Kent would just be about to fall out of the top 50, he'd come along, post a half dozen or so new personal records, never with any videos of course, and he'd jump up to about 45th place, remain inside the top 50 for another half a year or whatever it may be, and this would go on ad infinitum. He never posted on the forum or otherwise interacted with the Elite community at any point over this time, at least as far as I can remember. We noticed this strange pattern of behavior which was lightly discussed in the forums, but no one really cared that much because of his lower rank and lack of great times. Another strange fact is that Kent never at any point held or claimed a GoldenEye world record, not even the extremely common and easy tied ones, like Bunker 118 or Runway 23, when those were records back in the day. This is completely anomalous to anyone else ranked inside the top 50 for so many years. Somewhere along the way, any top 50 player usually notches at least 1 or 2 common records here or there, but not Kent. Might this have been his way to avoid getting proof called? Eventually in 2013, the GoldenEye moderators froze Kent's times page, which meant he would have to communicate with a moderator to post any more records. We hoped this would bait him out of the darkness and we could ask him what's going on, but it never did. I always figured that sometime in 2014 he was just about to fall out of the top 50 again, went to post more times, noticed his times page was frozen, figured the jig was up, and crept off quietly in the shadows. Some Kent defenders, however, posit the idea that Kent simply retired and hasn't played GoldenEye since his last set of times in 2013. I find this hard to believe, as his pattern of behavior was consistent for over 10 years, and his theorized retirement coinciding exactly with his times page being frozen is just too much of a coincidence. Earlier this year, we had another discussion on the forums about Kent, and Axel Z, the GoldenEye rankings moderator who froze Kent's times page in 2013, revealed that he did so because Kent never responded to any messages requesting videos for his claims at the time, and Axel messaged him on the forums and sent long emails to him throughout the years praising all of his cool web pages, but Kent never replied to anything he wrote. The Elite decided to backroll all of Kent's remaining personal record claims to his best proven times, so nothing. His times page is now blank. To be clear, Kent isn't banned from the rankings. The community simply asks that if he were to reclaim scores on the site, to provide some proof. So Kent, if you're somewhere out there, you're more than welcome to come back along and submit times, as long as you have some videos. Coincidentally, just weeks ago, a new user named Bert86 showed up on the Elite forum and posted in the months-old Kent discussion thread, revealing further evidence of sketchy claims by Kent. Bert showed a link on the N64HS website where Kent claimed a Crystal Lake time in 1080 snowboarding of 102.64, which Bert suggests is impossible because of the way the game increments the timer on the stage. You can only get a 102.60, 0.63, or 0.66. I don't know myself if this is true or not, but if Bert is correct, this is just more evidence against Kent's credibility. It was also uncovered while researching this video that Kent did similar in Super Mario Kart, claiming records ending in decimals that were not possible, which also resulted in him being removed from those rankings. With Kent having so many claims, scores, and times in so many Nintendo games with no videos, we can only imagine what's really going on down there. Is it possible that Kent was just some Luddite who honestly played Nintendo, got some scores, and maybe had a few errors entering them into an old database? Or did he make it all up and none of these bygone claims are to be believed? Most who were around way back when do agree that Kent did a lot of great work, manually, laboriously updating submitted scores to N64HS and creating an early gaming community. And maybe that should be his legacy, rather than claiming a pile of non-world record average tier unproven speedruns. I certainly like to think it's all water under the bridge now, but a very interesting case nonetheless, almost like a more moderate Cowan Hames of someone claiming tons of scores in games for a long time with zero proof to back it up. I'd be remiss if I didn't end this video by at least discussing the ongoing situation surrounding Steven Zwartes, a man who many claim to be one of the true early Nintendo 64 greats, and there is some evidence to support this. Zwartes is documented to have appeared and done very well at live events including European Nintendo Power Series tournaments and annual Nintendo tournaments in Waddinxveen, Netherlands, which were frequented by many of the top regional players at the time, including Patrick Wessels and Karel van Duivenboden, who are still around today and have corroborated much of this information. Zwartes' reputation from having been witnessed play live was so strong that the vast majority of his 77 career Mario Kart 64 world records, 64 career GoldenEye 007 world records, and numerous other records in other Nintendo titles largely set between 1998 and 2001 did not have any supporting video evidence. However, in an era where in-person reputation was considered more important than video proof, pretty much all of his world record claims were considered valid and accepted by various online leaderboards at the time. However, two claims made towards the tail end of Zwartes' career were ones that did eventually raise eyebrows and were removed from their respective rankings. In early 2002, Zwartes claimed an Aztec Agent 131 in GoldenEye, a would-be 25-second untied world record, using a strategy he claimed where he lured a guard to open this glass door, thus skipping a large part of the mission. No one would be able to replicate such a strategy until about half a year later when Brian Bosshart showed up to the community with a detailed description of how he was able to get it to work. Watch that Speedlore episode if you want to learn more about it. Zwarties was always vague describing his strategy, really only sharing that he was able to get it to work with one guard and a different guard than the ones Boss and now the community were able to successfully use to lure to open the glass. And even with Boss's discovery, no one was able to match Zwarties' claim until Ilu in November 2007, let alone beat it until Mark Rutsu in 2009. The 131 was eventually backrolled in April 2004, but left a lasting legacy in GoldenEye history. Zwarties' other notorious claim was on Luigi's Raceway. Zwarties did set a very impressive 3-lap non-shortcut world record in 1999 of 1:58.65, which was one of his handful of records that did have video footage. This record lasted 2.5 years until William Lacey barely beat it by 0.01 seconds, and former champion Michael Jongerius would later improve it another year later by 0.02 seconds. However, in May 2003, Zwarties' friend and fellow karter Lars Novin shared to the Mario Kart forum that Zwarties had raced a 1:58.14, beating the previous record by 0.48 seconds, an incredible cut in Mario Kart 64 terms, but with no video proof. Notable was that this would be the first world record Zwarties would claim since a pair in 2001, and the last one he would ever claim to have set. It'd be another 2 years until Michael Jongerius could finally beat this claimed record, barely, by 0.02 seconds, setting a 1:58.12, and it would be another 6 years until anyone could lower that any further when Matthias Rustmeyer set a 1:58.07. Zwarties' claimed second lap time on this run of 38:32 has only been matched or beaten once in 15 years, a 38:31 by Vincent Tolhuis. The run in question would be good enough to place 5th on today's Luigi Raceway rankings. Needless to say, Zwarties' claims stood the test of time far greater than most records from that era. That being said, I'm withholding judgment on Zwarties for now because through the process of researching this video, Zwarties has resurfaced and shown us this footage of scrolling proof from his old Mario Kart 64 cartridge, displaying both his proven 1:58.65 and 1:58.14 on the cart. Of course, this isn't proof by today's standards, nor the standards of, say, 10 years ago, and it is editable via GameShark or EverDrive. However, it's still a lot more than we saw back in the day. Some players have noted that the gaps between Zwarties' Luigi Raceway runs saved on file are uncharacteristically large, on a level where it's common to improve only by a few frames at a time, so this really just gave us as many questions as answers. Some who are still in touch with Zwarties are also trying to get him a GoldenEye cartridge, which he's long given away to his brother, but he seems intent on finally playing again and revealing his Aztec strategy from 2002. We know from what he described that he claims his strategy was something completely unique to anything we've discovered so far, so we can't just show off a known strategy and pretend it's the one he used years ago. If he is able to demonstrate a completely new technique in opening the Aztec glass door, it'll be absolutely historic and could go a long way towards gaining credibility he doesn't have with newer players who weren't around to witness his play in person years ago. I'm planning on doing a follow-up on Zwarties, more specifically, diving into other records and other games he claimed over the years, tracking down VHS tapes that some people claim he sent out over the years, and talking to those who saw him play. But first, we need to see how this whole recent quest Zwarties is on to prove his records once again plays out. So keep your eyes peeled, because if he does finally reveal some ancient strategy on Aztec, it will shake the very foundations of GoldenEye speedrunning to its core. I have to conclude at least with the mention that I truly despise revisionist history. You know, when you see some think piece pop up on Twitter or Facebook about how George Washington or John A. MacDonald wouldn't have been considered good people by today's social standards, so we should go about renaming parks and public schools which bear their names. And how is this any different than applying modern proof standards to legendary claims of speedruns past? It's certainly a philosophical struggle I have when going back and trying to tell the stories of these old speedrun legends. But is it a little different? Are we really revising history if we're trying to figure out whether or not something actually happened at all? Does being good and being witnessed by many give you free reign to claim whatever records you'd like and take away the right of anyone else to question it? In the famous case of Todd Rogers, we definitively learned many of his claims were impossible, and so that history was revised, or maybe better yet, corrected. But all the cases I covered here, the claims turned out to be possible, maybe by dumb luck, or maybe because they really happened. So there you have it. I hope you enjoyed these 5 legendary tales of speedrunners who claimed records without proof. There are definitely more stories of unproven claims I could tell, and I'm going to continue researching the Jorty's case over the next little while, so subscribe if you like this video and want to see more speedrunning history and content. And let me know if you know any similar cases in more modern speedrunning or non-N64 titles. I'd love to hear new stories that I missed out on over the years. In the meantime, thanks for watching and supporting the channel, stay true, and I'll see you in the next stream or video.